one moment. I'm getting ready to present, which is great because it auto records. So hit record. Now, before we really get going, do you guys have any questions about anything last week or otherwise? No questions? Everyone feels pretty good? So as per the usual, if you guys do have a question, you can unmute yourself and you can always go ahead and put it up in the chat. So I'm making sure that I got the participant thing open in case we have any folks showing up late. And as always, we can do some polling. Oh, boom, there we go. We got one student hopping in. All right, so tonight is talking about just basic needs, how we figure that out. And then we're gonna talk about a number of different approaches for it, along with kind of how it all starts, and then moving away from there. So the reason we care about needs is because that lets us know what are our baseline requirements to keep going. Now we're going to get into what's known as discretionary calories later on. And most people have a lot of them. And obviously a number of people take in way more of them than they need. And that's okay, depending on obviously what your goals are. So there's a lot of different government variations from the initial attempts with the food guide pyramid, which a lot of people thought you should always just be at the top of the pyramid, which was sweets and fats, which was wrong. And then we moved our way into kind of the guy walking up the pyramid with the slices. And now we're in the My Plate, which is a bit better. We're gonna talk about reading the label, which just like reading in general, left to right, top to bottom. So the thing we want you guys to really focus on when you're reading labels is understanding what's gonna be the most important depending on where or what person we're working with. Understanding how health claims for the most part should never be trusted for a number of reasons. It's not so much that they don't have scientific underpinnings, it's just we're sometimes making some extrapolations, which I really am not a fan of. Then we're gonna talk about some basics of how we're gonna determine needs, understanding what is essential, and then the different definitions of it. So if you guys look at the image on the bottom here, you can see essential nutrient is literally something that you cannot make in the body. And so if you don't have enough of it, you are literally going to possibly die from it, not grow appropriately, and or have poor health. So when we're talking about all of our essential nutrients, this is going to be a number of vitamins and minerals, along with our 8 different essential amino acids, and it's going to be 2 different fatty acids. It's actually no carbohydrates. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, but boy howdy, life is a lot easier with carbs. Then we have our conditionally essential nutrients. And these are gonna be ones that under certain conditions, we're going to need more of them, specifically during development. So this can be in the womb, like with folate. This can be development when you're just essentially trying to grow up and get taller, and that's gonna be a lot of vitamins and minerals. And then also with parental feeding. So we're really talking about lactation otherwise. And then we have our non-essentials. So things we don't need, but boy howdy, it tends to be good to go ahead and get enough of them. And this is gonna be things like fiber. So when we're trying to figure out our basic needs, one of the first things we're gonna come to is what's known as our recommended daily allowance. And on most of these, except for the ones with our fats, which can be a little misguided depending on classification, is going to be based upon minimums, okay? Your RDA is effectively how much of a given nutrient an individual needs to not have any issues with a disease related to inadequate intake. And this is the idea. The RDA is usually set at a point of which effectively 95% of the population shouldn't have any issues with it. Now, this is going to come from what's known as the dietary reference intakes, which is DRIs, which are based on how much you need in order to make sure that we're not having any potential issues, once again, with an inadequate effect that might occur. So when I say a lack of intake of one nutrient or another, can you guys think of any types of diseases that occur due to not having enough of one vitamin, mineral, or otherwise?
What about people who are anemic?
Anemia, and that would be an example of a lack of what mineral?
Iron.
Bingo. Good. How many of you guys have ever heard of scurvy before? Good. Nice. All right, so we got a number of you guys that have heard of scurvy before. Now, my question is, what is going to be the disease that occurs if you don't have, oh, sorry, Ian, now that I saw you put scurvy up in the chat, I didn't have it set where I could see it. What vitamin is scurvy related to?
Vitamin C.
Bingo, great job there, Jake. Vitamin C and a lack of the intake there. So like anything else, we need to make sure we're getting in an adequate amount of each of those vitamins and minerals. And it's fitting that we obviously have a number of folks in here in the exercise science department that really like to work out. So thanks to the way that you live your life, you're going to be more likely to have an issue with certain nutrients due to maybe nutritional decisions, and then obviously the stress of your life itself. Now,
Question.
Yeah, what's up, bud?
So for like osteoporosis, I've seen stuff like if you take in too much calcium, you can run your risk up for osteoporosis, or is that not true?
So the problem with osteoporosis is it's multimodal. So it's not just a lack of calcium. You also need vitamin D to help with your absorption of calcium. You need vitamin K to help with the calcification of your bones and not of your arteries. And then actually magnesium a little bit is going to work as essentially something that's going to help spare calcium. And then strontium seems to potentially have an effect with tendinous junction to bone, but I haven't seen enough lit on that to really feel really strong about it. But other supplement companies are very comfortable selling products directed at that. So it's like anything else. You definitely are going to need, you need everything, but how much of this and how much of that, you know, as far as you need to figure out what the limiting factor is for the individual. And with osteoporosis, another big issue is simply a lack of impact, a lack of resistance training, a lack of load. That's why typically individuals who are more likely to be osteoporotic are individuals that are normal to slightly underweight, and they're usually smaller of build as far as height also. That's why it's found more typically in older women. But even that's really messed up because, sounds odd here, guys. Just bear with me on the math here. If you were born in, we'll make you guys do a simple math problem. If you are 100-year-old great-grandmother today, what year were you born in?
1920.
1920. So that means you were born in 1920. Now, in the 1940s, there was kind of a big thing going on. And as a woman, what were you probably doing?
Trying to vote in the 1920s.
Say that louder, Hannah.
Are you asking about what women were trying to do in the 1920s?
Well, I mean, to be fair, you would have been an infant to 10 years old, so you're pretty useless. Like, little kids are pretty damn useless. But think about what that person's life would have been like. Yeah, they would have been 10 in 1930. 1940, they would have been 20 years old. 1950, they would have been 30. And if they were, so if a woman born around that age, she pretty much becomes, you think the atomic family 1950s stereotype of the housewife that doesn't really have a lot of opportunity for physical activity, isn't really getting a chance to play a lot of competitive sports, probably is not allowed to do anything as far as resistance training or otherwise. And then in the same thing in the 60s, 70s, and then in 1980, she's a 60-year-old woman, so it's highly unlikely she's getting into the bodybuilding craze at that point, much less getting into playing a lot more contact sports and getting to take advantage of Title IX because she's already over 50 years old. So a lot of those women that have issues with osteoporosis that are very old at this point, we're also looking at cultural effects. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's a big thing to keep in mind when we look at this longitudinal research or generational research. One of the issues is with muscle physiology. There's research out there that shows you that, or there's some research that shows that older muscle fiber in women is of lower quality than muscle fiber in men. But the problem with that research is it was performed well. They did everything correctly, but they did the actual study in Muncie, Indiana. And they got a sample of mostly guys that were ex-farmers, or they had a manual labor lifestyle. And the women that they were able to get samples from were pretty much either sedentary or very low activity housewives. So what they try to argue is that it's not argue, but they just point out like, hey, look at this gender difference. It's like, is it a gender difference, or is it, if I just took a population of people that don't work out that are old and a population of people that do work out and are old and worked out for most of their life, they're probably going to have better quality muscle. So getting back to our DRIs, when we're looking at these intakes, we're trying to get someone, the estimated average requirement EAR, that is literally the amount of something you're going to give to where you're going to assume that 50% of the population is going to have an issue with a lack of intake. So what we see on labels is usually around the RDA. Now, we always are going to have what's known as the tolerable upper intake level. And so the TUI, or just the upper intake, so you just see UL, this is going to be the point of which where you're taking in so much of something where you can now literally start to have issues due to toxicity. In fact, iron is one of the most, it's one of the most acutely poisonous minerals if you take in too much of it. You can take in too much potassium. Actually, that's how lethal injection works. Mind you, the amount of bananas you would have to eat, you probably die from choking on a banana before you died of an excess in potassium. But it's important to know that too much of anything is in fact a poison. How many of you guys have ever heard the term water intoxication? Awesome. So who wants to go ahead and explain the basics of that?
Isn't it where you have too much water and then it dilutes the salt level of your body, and then you basically don't have enough sodium?
Yeah, great job. So what happens is you take in too much water too quickly, you can get yourself into hyponatremia, which is going to be an issue because literally the sodium in it, you haven't lost it. The key is it's so diluted that now the electrical chemical gradients on your cells don't work like they're supposed to. And it can literally end to cardiac or cause cardiac arrest, like your heart will stop beating because it's not able to work like it's supposed to. So you got to drink like an uncomfortably large amount of water rapidly in order to cause this, and not because you're dehydrated in order for this to occur. But it is a thing that has happened. It actually happened a number of years back for a radio show did a call-in or did a competition to see or have these people win a Wii, and literally one of the ladies in the competition died from it. And it's happened a number of times in the military when they were literally punished with having to drink water. But in those cases, it was very rarely lethal. And different countries have their own RDAs. We're going to get into it a little bit and how much I hate American food labels, and I love international food labels because we as Americans don't like to do the maths good. So we don't need to get really finicky, and I want you guys to always remember when you're looking at the diet is the key is finding what works for the person you're working with that's sustainable. That's it. Once you do that, you got a lot of latitude outside of that one. But all we're looking for is the diet has all the essential nutrients and they have the quality of life they want, and they can maintain this diet for as long as they want to. Problem is, obviously, a lot of people adopt strategies that work pretty good acutely, but they aren't things they can sustain for a really long period of time. So the basics behind a balanced diet is that we're eating a wide variety of foods, specifically a lot of vegetables and a lot of fruits. From there, you can throw in a certain amount of meat or not do meat and do dairy, or not do dairy and you can do grains, or you can just eat a lot of vegetables. I don't care. The key is you want to make sure that you've got a wide variety of food sources. And just because you're going to be more likely to get in all of the nutrients you're supposed to, and you want to make sure that someone enjoys it. Have any of you guys heard of the term anti-dieting? Okay. So it looks like the vast majority of you guys haven't heard of it, but since I got a number of people that haven't said anything, I guess somebody's got the answer. Oh, now they're voting because they knew I was going to pick on them. Let's see here. Oh, Jai, do you know what anti-dieting is, man? Go for it.
Not really, to be honest.
Just take a shot, bud.
Maybe not following a diet at all.
You're not far off. The basic idea is just let people frickin' eat. So don't worry about being vegan. Don't worry about being paleo. Don't worry about being keto. Don't worry about being carnivore. The key is eat when you're hungry, and when you're not hungry, stop. Now, I am an incredibly biased individual that, if you haven't noticed, guys, I kind of hold my ground a little aggressively on certain things. I like a lot of concepts behind it. The application of it is problematic, but there's a lot of caveats to anti-dieting. So it's not like just eat what you feel like and stop when you're no longer hungry, or stop when you start to feel full. Because if we just wanted to think like debagging it, high school, like, oh, sweet, so I'm just going to eat, Burger King for breakfast, Taco Bell for lunch, and then murder my GI for dinner and do that on a loop. Like, no, you still want to make better health choices, but you don't want to make people feel bad about the choices that they're doing. Because if you haven't noticed, most people don't really do well when you tell them that they're wrong, even when they are. And one of the biggest issues we have is how we're socialized with food can be not necessarily in a negative way, or there's obviously a lot of folks that have issues with food scarcity. So hence when food's available, they're going to gouge themselves on it. So they learn to overstuff themselves, and that can be an issue. And then how many of you guys growing up, your family had essentially the basic doctrine that you are not allowed to get up from the table until you finish your plate? Which is a great way to reinforce the concept of overeating, because you're not stopping eating when you're full. You're now going to go ahead and eat because you were told to eat, and you do so. So, for example, don't get me wrong, guys, eating breakfast can be very useful. Do you guys actually know where the research on showing that breakfast is important for academic performance actually originated? Do you guys know what the original population was? It was kids on subsidized breakfast and lunches. Because this is a real problem, and I don't know how it's being navigated right now during COVID, which is a lot of kids, or not a lot of kids, but there's a solid number of kids out there that literally their parents can't really provide much food to them. So the only meals they get are the ones when they go to school. And so it turns out if you're a kid that's starving and they feed you breakfast before you start learning in school, you do a better job of learning because you're no longer starving. The whole breakfast is important for your academic performance. That's where it really originates. So for your average person, meaning Homer Simpson, you can skip breakfast. In fact, now you have this entire area of science, which is fascinating, which is intermittent fasting. So that's purposefully skipping meals. And if that's what works for you, that's fine. But once again, guys, you have to find the modality that the person can sustain, because I imagine, and this is another polling question, everyone here knows somebody that did some type of insanely hard diet, stopped, and then gained all the weight back. So yeah, safe to say, exactly. That's a real thing. And that's why I like the quote from Ice Cube, which I'm going to modify for obvious reasons, which is, life's not a track meet, it's a marathon. Blank the cemetery that a person gets buried on. Because you need to have that diet method that's going to work for the long term. So each country has its own iteration of it. I like the variation of the whole My Plate, which the Canadians were the first to do it. Now the US has their own version. There's the Eat Well plate over in the UK. Basic idea of having a visual image of what food should look like. And what that should be made up of. It's just an easy way to go about it. Now, it's not just eating a good diet, but it's being physically active. It's being mindful of how much poison you're drinking, aka alcohol. You know, the one drug that we legalize but makes you more likely to beat your significant other and drive fast and poorly. And just trying to make better choices when you can. Now, when it comes to reading labels, and this is why I absolutely loathe American labels, because in Europe and a lot of other places throughout the world, chime in if this is true, they will actually give you in one serving, it'll be like 12.1 grams or 11.9. America, we just round it to the nearest 0.5 or the whole number. Do they do that back home, Jai?
Yeah, I think they do.
Which is good because that lets you understand a little bit more information. Because when we get to health claims in a few moments, you're going to hear me get a little annoyed, is the gentle term for it. So the first we want to know is the serving size. Because we know the serving size, that is going to contextualize everything else that comes after that. Now, what can you guys think of that has an incredibly small serving size when you actually look at the label on the box?
Peanut butter.
Who said that?
Jake. Lewis.
Yeah, peanut butter. 2 freaking tablespoons. Who's going to stop at 2 tablespoons? Like, that's like a thin layer on even small slices of bread. So that's an easy one that you're going to be taking way more than one serving. What else can you guys think of?
A lot of sauces.
Yeah, a lot of sauces, the same basic idea. It'll just be a tablespoon or otherwise. Obviously, you guys see the packets of ketchup, or otherwise that's supposed to be 1 serving. And how many people are using 4 or 5 packets, depending on obviously how they're using it as a condiment. What else, guys? Nolan, you got something to say, bud?
Yeah, it doesn't like I don't know, I've seen like sometimes when I get like cheddar cheese at Kroger, like the serving sizes are like super small.
Yeah, it's like an ounce.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, you're not wrong. Another one that I think is pretty bad, but I'm someone that naturally likes to eat a lot. That's just kind of who I am, which is cereal. Like breakfast cereals and otherwise usually have like a 1/4 cup or 1/2 cup servings for some of them. And then you look at the commercials when they have like the bowl where it's like the equivalent of like 3 cups of the cereal. I'm like, yeah, that's what I consider a bowl of cereal. So
What about
in that context. Oh, go ahead.
what about like meats like chicken and like I feel like those are never like people never eat the right amount of like that serving size.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's when you think of the serving size, like 1 serving of chicken, they usually give you the rule of thumb, so to speak, for that is a deck of cards. Now, I will always remember being it's my wife's sister's wedding, and it was a plated meal. And they literally brought out the chicken breast for dinner. and it was the deck of cards size. And the long sigh that came from Lauren's late uncle, like, oh man, like it got set in front of me. Just, and I had to not laugh in the middle of the reception because sweet Jesus, if for most of you guys, because when you think of the portions and the volumes you're used to, a deck of cards worth of chicken is quite small. But that's being said, of course, by someone that's grown up in America and hasn't really, my issues with food has been due to too much as opposed to not enough, which obviously occurs a lot of other places, including still here. So great job, guys. Once we know the serving size, we're going to look at the calories. And why do we look at the calories first? Because that's the thing that's really pushing our weight. Meaning, are we taking in too few calories or are we taking in too many calories? Then we're going to look at our macronutrients. And I like how I somehow put this in as Marco's. So I guess we're looking for Marco, and I guess after that is going to come Polo. So with our macros, we're going to go ahead and make sure that, depending on what our goals are, so if we're a long distance runner, we're going to make sure we're getting enough carbohydrate. If we are someone that's trying to maintain muscle mass when we're losing weight, we're going to really focus on protein. All those macros can be very useful depending on goals. Then we're going to worry about micronutrients, depending on, once again, do we have deficiencies? Do we have anemia? Do we have low bone mineral density? What are we trying to work on? And then we can start looking at other interests, like issues with ingredients. And there's going to be a number of situations where you'd start differently. Like you wouldn't start looking at the serving size. What would be a situation you guys can think of where you would start looking at the label differently? Oh my God, guys. Great job in...
What do you mean by differently?
I just haven't been able to see it. Oh, sorry, say that again.
What do you mean by differently?
Oh, as in you wouldn't start off with serving size. You'd start off with something else on the label. Great job, Blaine. Food allergies. You're going to start off with the ingredients. If someone's allergic to soy, peanuts, wheat, dairy, etc., you're starting off with the ingredients. And certain health issues. So if you have high cholesterol, what's very interesting, Courtney, is for the vast majority of people, the amount of dietary cholesterol you take in actually doesn't influence your blood lipid profile. Instead, that's going to be more of an effect of what's going on with your genetics. And then also, we'll touch on it briefly later, of your omega-6 or omega-3 fatty acid intake. Caitlin, that's a good point with sodium, where specifically if you happen to be someone that's sodium sensitive, and that's a really interesting subtlety, which is going to be, you guys are really killing it in the chat, and I'm having a hard time keeping up, which I like. What you find is actually about 2/3 of the population, if we can give them however much salt we want each day, and it's not going to affect their blood pressure either way. Now, about 1/3 of the population are salt sensitive. So if you go a high sodium diet, they're actually going to increase their blood pressure, and it's going to be bad for the health. But what's fascinating is less than 10% of the population are paradoxically affected, where they're going to go ahead and if they get in not enough salt, their blood pressure is going to go up. So they need to take in more than enough. Diabetes and carbohydrates is absolutely correct, and especially those sources of carbohydrates. So if it's more like a simple sugar, it's going to affect their blood sugar far faster. It's going to be important. Holy cow. And if they have issues with iron, now iron is going to be important also when you look at what it's coming with. So iron with fiber is less digestible, or phytates, caffeine, etc. When increase iron absorption, we want to do it with vitamin C and make sure it's in heme form. Follow certain diets like vegetarian, vegan, kosher, pescatarian, etc. Yeah, man, if you're going to be vegan and you don't even want to take honey from the bees, you've got a lot of stuff you need to keep track of. And yes, the good old gluten. My wife's a celiac, so literally that is pretty much the first thing we look on the label. And it is surprising how many foods that you guys are going to buy in the store that they find a way to sneak gluten into, soy into, and then usually some form of corn into. So if you've got allergies there, you can have a heck of a time eating out of boxes. Meanwhile, it turns out broccoli and beef are still gluten-free. So you are fine, but eating certain types of foods can become more challenging. Great job, guys. Great job. So as far as looking at different sources of nutrients, I just put this in here because I don't really like it, because it turns out all of these different sources of these vitamins and minerals, it turns out you can knock them out with literally just giving people beef and vegetables, and we're pretty much done. Now, vitamin D is fascinating because if you get enough sun exposure, you don't actually need to ever take it. And what's fascinating is your organ meats are actually typically very high in vitamins and minerals. So if you find yourself in a survivor type situation, you want to eat the liver and the kidneys of just about anything you kill, because that's going to have a lot of the vitamins and minerals you're going to need to survive, specifically a lot of the fat soluble vitamins you're going to want so that you can survive. People don't like liver. I don't know why. Now, it's time for me to get annoyed. Now, think back to that wonderful serving size of how much you need to take in of a given nutrient for that to be considered one serving. So notice, guys, if it has less than 5 calories per serving, so if it has 4.9 calories per serving, they can say 0. If it has less than half a gram of fat, so 0.49 grams of fat, they can say it's fat-free. And the same thing with sugar. Because you know how everybody does such a great job of only taking in 1 serving of a food, much less than 1 serving. And what's also fascinating is when it comes to reduce sugar, reduce fat, reduce sodium foods, typically when they do so, they then increase 1 or 2 of those other 3. So if they decrease the fat content, they typically increase the sugar content and or the salt content as a means to make that food more enjoyable. Now, the same thing is to be said about trans fats, and that's why it's easy to go and sneak this in. Now, notice, guys, these are health claims. So if we have enough calcium in a food, they can go ahead and claim that it's positive for bone health. It has low sodium, can help with hypertension, which, once again, is statistically correct for a decent amount of the population. When it comes to dietary fat and increased risk of cancer, notice it's only some cancers, and that science is still out, because as we learn when we're going to start talking about the individual fats, there's a lot of variability going on with each of the different types of fats you can take in. Saturated fats and cholesterol, once again, depends on the type of saturated fat. Trans fats are the way bigger issue, and they can have some effect. The cholesterol from your cholesterol intake doesn't really have that big of an effect on your blood cholesterol levels, and that's a bit of a misnomer. Though fiber does help with not just digestive health, but also actually can help you lower your cholesterol a little bit. Folic acid or folate and decreasing birth defects is absolutely true, and that is something that if you're a lady that's interested in ever having a kid, you should probably start on your prenatal vitamins before you start trying to have the kid, so that way you know your body is going to be essentially good to go on those mineral and vitamin levels before you get that 9-month parasite growing inside of you. And then good old sugar and cavities. Yeah, so it turns out not doing as much sugar is going to give you better outcomes with not getting as many cavities. Now, when we're processing foods, that doesn't always mean we're trying to fill it with a bunch of things that are going to kill you. There's a lot of things that are going to be involved in processing food that can help or hinder the food's nutrition. Sometimes it removes some components. Sometimes you add some components. Sometimes you're doing things to change the texture, make it easier to go ahead and chew, adding preservatives so it's going to last on the shelf for longer. And then sometimes adding colorings. This could be food dyes that you're going to see. And then everything else below that I'm not going to insult your intelligence. What is fascinating is the colors, specifically the food dyes. Some of them are literally made up of, well, red dye number 4, I believe, is actually made up of crushed up red beetle. And so when people say they're allergic to red dye number 4, they're actually allergic to a very specific type of beetle, which I find kind of cool. And now there is some concern about nutrition, quality of food declining thanks to processing. It's not that accurate, but it's more of issues with soil integrity and the way that we're growing fruits and vegetables, where they have lower mineral content, and some of them actually do have lower vitamin content. But then the amount of vitamin and mineral content is going to be highly variable depending on how they're actually grown, the area, and the speed at which they're grown at. So one good question from Sean. With with the issues with sodium, sugar, etc., which one do you think is the worst? That is a very hard thing to really say. In that, I think the problem with diet is the same problem with trying to get folks to be physically active in a way to help with their health and longevity, which is I think of myself, this is a real weird metaphor for life, but hopefully this kind of makes some sense for you guys. I'm just a person in the middle of a large body of water, and I'm trying to make it to the shore. But there's a tide that every day is pulling me a little bit further away from the shore. So every day when I make all the right decisions, I swim a little bit closer to the shore. Every time I don't do anything, I just tread water and I get pulled a little bit further away from where I want to be. And on the days where I'm like, F it, it's time to do Taco Bell and Wendy's and McMurder my GI, I'm actively swimming further out into the ocean. And so the choices that we make with our own health, from exercise, nutrition, sleep, the stressors we get exposed to, are all cumulative. You're not going to have one McDonald's cheeseburger and die of a heart attack. You're not going to, not eat one vegetable and that's what caused the cancer. It's the long, consistent mistakes or correct decisions that are going to move you more in the direction of where you don't want to go or where you want to go. And it requires active, deliberate choices. So with the genetics that I come from, the biggest issues that I have, or that's the most likely one, is going to be diabetes. Both type 1 and type 2 runs in both sides of my family. So the thing that's going to be most likely to get me, so to speak, is probably going to be sugar. Now, that's not saying trans fats can't have certain effects. That's not saying that sodium might be an issue. But as far as my blood pressure isn't really an issue, so I'm not really too concerned about sodium. And most people in my family don't have any issue with it either. And I'm lucky enough to know my genetic family and kind of seeing what kills all of them aside from their mouth. So from there, that's what makes my informed decision. But if you're somebody that comes from a family where nobody's diabetic, nobody has any issues with random cancers or so forth, but everybody seems to have a heart attack due to high blood pressure, okay, then it probably is the sodium is the thing you need to look out for. And, we're lucky in that when I speak from this position, it's a privileged one, in that I can at least get an idea down the road of what's most likely to kill me. Like a violent death is pretty damn rare for people that, obviously do what I do professionally, in the lifestyle that I lead. It's pretty rare that I'm going to die a violent death. It's more likely that I'm going to die a death caused by some disease, and the disease is most likely one that's caused through chronic, slightly wrong decisions. So once again, when you're working with people, be it yourself, friends, family members, clients, it's important that we try to contextualize what's going to be the most important thing. Because you can be overweight and still healthy. My BMI is once again over 30. Yeah. So I'm technically obese. But I will stand shirtless next to any faculty in my age group, not you young kids, because I want to feel better about myself, not worse. And that's me being very petty. But it's important to make sure that we're trying to figure out what's going to give somebody the quality of life that they want and allow them to go as far as they go. Cam, Bud, it's all relative and you're always welcome to come train. Well, once the pandemic's over, we can be around other people. Oh, God. How many of you guys are familiar with the term lifespan? Okay, okay. So most folks are. I got a couple no's. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, now I'm going to clear this out. So I'm sorry if you haven't voted yet. How many of you guys are familiar with the term health span? Wow. Okay. So an important component, since obviously nutrition along with exercise are going to be two big keys. Oh, we got one yes. Who's our one yes? Excuse me. iPhone. iPhone is a yes. Whoever iPhone is, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, go ahead and just try to explain the difference between health span and lifespan.
I actually meant to say lifespan. I think I know what lifespan is. Sorry about that, Lane.
No, it's okay. Go for it.
Lifespan is basically, if I think correctly, is just your overall wealth of your diet, your exercise, and your mental health too. Just overall well-being.
Okay, now you're talking wellness. Yeah, the difference between health and wellness.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. That's okay. So
Sorry.
lifespan is literally like how long you live until you become worm food. So your lifespan is, pretty much to the last heartbeat you have, last breath you take, last little flicker of a thought you have through your brain. So, in the US, it's going to be something in the 70 odd year range, and plus or minus, obviously, depending on a lot of confounding factors. So your health span is how long you live where you still are considered healthy. So you still can live on your own, take care of yourself, carry your own groceries, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to your health span, how many of you guys have had a family member that they lived, as far as lifespan, almost 2 decades, or at least a decade longer than they really had their health span for? Yeah. I'm sure everybody has got that family member that they were in a wheelchair, not very coherent, were not able to take care of themselves, didn't have that quality of life. And so, my parents are pretty close to their 70s now. And so, I want them to live as long as possible. And at the same time, I want them to, however, have as much of a healthy life as they can. Like if, I'm sure everybody here has experienced or been around somebody that has really bad Alzheimer's or dementia, or, the end stage of cancer and otherwise. And like, that's a hard look. Like, obviously dying's not easy, but we want to do everything we can to increase and maintain our health for as long as possible. So to get back to your question, Sean, that's kind of my thought towards it. And so the last component here, which is fat substitute like Olestra, they're really good at effectively lubricating your GI, so you are more likely to have, as I like to colloquially refer to it as, disaster pants or diarrhea. So you can use artificial sweeteners and fat substitutes. Artificial sweeteners, they don't really seem to have any major negative effects, at least definitely not acutely. Maybe chronically is a little bit more of an issue. But the key is you have to ask yourself, which is worse, them drinking the high fructose corn syrup or them getting in the sucralose? And honestly, for myself, I would lean on most of the time it's the high fructose corn syrup that's going to be problematic, not so much the sucralose, but we're the equivalent of saying, which would you prefer to stick your hand into? Warm dog poop or cold dog poop? Personally, I'd rather just put my hand in the grass and not in the cold or the hot dog poop. So now we need to have a way to obviously analyze people's dietary intakes. And there's a wide variety of ways to do it. The longer we're going to record for, so for your guys' projects, we're doing that for those 2 different 4-day blocks. So the 3-day food record is good, 7 days even better, because anybody can like clean it up and make it look better for a couple days. But once you go in and you see it for a week, that's where you really get the tail of the tape of what's going on. Now, duplicate food collections, meaning we're going to be doing this more than once, is useful because you get an idea of how things are going and changing over time. Now, 24-hour recall is just useful because you're going to usually find like your big blocks, like the things that are wrong with the individual's diet. So an example here is working with an athlete. Gosh, that would have been probably a couple weeks ago, because they, one of those wonderful friend of a friend, they put me in contact, and it was some kid who, that was in the before times, last spring, where an athlete was having issues gaining weight. So I asked them, did you eat breakfast? And the answer to that was no. Okay. Well, what did you have for lunch? I had a Pop-Tart and a Monster. I'm like, oh, okay. And what are you gonna do for dinner? I don't know. I'm probably gonna just go to the cafeteria and eat something. I'm like, okay. The major issue with that person who's trying to gain weight is simply not enough calories. So you don't have to get interesting and exotic and worry about, instead of doing white bread, we do wheat bread or potatoes or rice, etc. Instead, it's like, we just need to make sure they're eating more frequently and they're eating enough when they do so. And that's where food frequency questionnaires are really useful, because we can see, okay, which of these things are you likely to drink? How often do you drink them and eat them? So the reason I say that is because a number of people that are trying to lose weight, you find out they're doing a lot of liquid calories, meaning they're doing a lot of soda, a lot of juice, a lot of these other things that allows them to go ahead and effectively not lose the weight they want to, because they have extra calories sneaking in. And dietary history just gives you an idea of what are the typical things this individual likes to eat, what are the types of situations they like to, as far as timing of their meals, and that kind of gives you some ideas of what are some easy things that we can go ahead and make some modifications that's going to easily work for their lifestyle. So what do you consider a healthy caloric surplus for someone wanting to gain weight? Now, Blaine, when it comes to weight gain, the rule of thumb, if we're trying to make sure we're gaining more of the weight that we can flex and less of the weight that we jiggle, we're going to be talking about a 250 to 500 calorie surplus effectively per day over the course of that week, and then maintaining that obviously however long we need to. Now that requires first having a good baseline understanding of caloric intake, but then from there, obviously having the discipline to stick with that surplus. And as I'm going to show you guys in a little bit from a really cool calculator I found online, a means to go ahead and trying to get them to realize that the body doesn't work perfectly. We're always going to have a little bit of wiggle room on both sides, because we're just not that efficient. There's a lot of things going on in your life. Some days you're going to be more active than you would expected, and other days you're going to be less active. Baseline intake of food before adjustment, or baseline from BMR. I would go from your actual typical food intake. So if you've got a really good working knowledge of your dietary intake, there's both a systems-based approach, and then there's actually kind of a rigid structure approach that I think are really good if you're trying to gain or lose weight. So the basic idea with a system-based approach is you figure out what are you not doing and you start doing it. So this means the system, and this is how I'd approach it for most people because it's the easiest thing to go for. They're trying to gain weight and they're not gaining weight. Are you eating 3 meals a day, yes or no? The answer is no. We're making sure you're eating 3 actual meals per day. Are you eating 3 meals per day? Yes. Okay, you're eating 3 meals per day plus a snack. Are you eating 3 meals per day plus a snack? Yes. Now you're going to go ahead and eat a snack before you go to bed. And we're going to make sure those meals are spaced out by at least 3 to 4 hours. So that way you're getting consistent calories over the day. And those meals have to have a certain criteria of size. But that way you don't have to worry about getting down to the minutia, because a lot of people don't like to weigh their food and measure it out for every single meal. It can be a little daunting. Now that's the other option though, which is incredibly effective. but we've got to have a pretty good working idea of what someone's caloric intake is to start. Now, if we know how many calories you are taking in and then how that relates to your body weight change over a week, meaning it hasn't, which is much easier to do if you're male. Females, can have that natural water weight change depending on the point in the cycle, which can make understanding where they're trending a little bit more difficult. But if you go ahead and you're following this over a long enough period of time, you're going to see the trending, and you're going to realize that what was initially the calories you needed to gain weight now becomes the calories just to maintain that new weight. And so now you got to titrate the calories up again so you can gain weight again. And it's important to just never do it too quickly, because we can only really gain muscle at a finite rate. And I mean, that's with or without drug abuse. So with that understanding, you want to make sure you're not going too quick, because the body's really good with any extra calories you're taking in to go ahead and now add that as body fat. And that's where the more rapidly you gain weight, the more fat weight you're going to gain with it. And the opposite is true when you're trying to lose weight. If you're trying to lose weight too rapidly, you're going to start to hemorrhage lean mass at a rate that can be as fast, if not faster, than you're losing your fat mass, which is not the goal whatsoever. So does that answer your question, Blaine? Cool. All right. So what we have here, guys, is the last little component. Now, I am never going to test you guys over all 60 of the essential minerals, vitamins, etc., because as far as I'm concerned, that's for Dr. Google, and you guys can always look it up. But I do think it's important that you understand that we have these essential minerals, vitamins, along with our fatty acids, and then our amino acids, that if we don't get in each of these, it turns out you're going to potentially have some major negative effects on your health. And it can always show up in one way, shape, or another. Now, most people are not going to have an issue with this whatsoever in that they're deficient, but you can have people due to the structure of their diet, meaning they're vegetarian, where they can have their issues with potentially not getting enough iron and not getting enough vitamin B12. You can have situations where people are a college bro and they eat like not a smart person. And so they're just eating a lot of, chicken nuggets and French fries. And because of that, okay, we can be looking at a couple different B vitamins, definitely some issues potentially with vitamin K, and then vitamin D, because it's not fortified, especially if they're not getting a lot of sun exposure. So we just want to make sure we're staying on top of what individuals need and just filling those demands. So it's meant to not be incredibly complex, but it should be still understood that you're always making sure you're filling in your basic needs. Now, let's have some fun with science. Give me one moment so I pull up another little website for you guys. Okay. All right. So you guys should hopefully be able to see what I'm doing here pretty well. So let's go ahead and we're going to crowdsource this between everybody real fast. So we're going to come up with a fictitious person. Okay. How much do they weigh, guys? Someone give me a body weight.
210.
200.
Awesome. Male or female?
Male.
How old?
23.
Nice. And I like how you guys are contributing. How tall are they going to be?
6'4".
Yeah, well, definitely not a short dude. Okay. How physically active?
Gets after it.
Gets after it. Okay. So,
And A.
Heavy.
oh no, that's their actual at work or school.
Oh, okay.
Let's be honest. I see how hard you guys work on your classes, so let's not lie. Okay. So here what we've got effectively is the start. So next thing we're going to go is say what their goal weight is. They're 210. we're going to say they're going to try to get down to what body weight?
195.
Okay. And then how long? Well, it's 180 days. So they got half a year to get there. So 180. And so now we're going to go ahead and next step it. We're not going to change our physical activity because that involves doing cardio, and I'm not about that life. Boom. So now this is based on a number of metabolic formulas from Ryan Hall and otherwise. It's one of the links I put up there for you guys to read, where this is, in order to maintain this body weight with that level of physical activity, there'd be 4,100 calories needed per day. So in order to cut down to 195 in effectively about half a year, they'd have to take in this many calories, and then afterwards their maintenance would be this. Now here's the thing. This is assuming that this person is as perfectly average as you're going to go ahead and get. But rarely is a human being going to be like that. So instead, what you're really going to get is a situation like this. Can you guys see that graph?
Yes.
Now notice you see the blue line, which is the average person. So that's hence why they'd stabilize the new body weight, and they would have to now chronically eat less calories than they did before. And that's something that gets a lot of people. Because once you're done with the diet, you can't just start eating like you used to, because you're just going to go right back to the way you used to be, because that's what you habituated to. Instead, notice they're going to drop that body weight down and then hold, but see this air variance, where if they happen to be someone that has a way slower metabolism than what you'd suspect, they could potentially, after the end of this period of time, have only slightly decreased their body weight, and when they switch over those maintenance calories, actually gain weight from where they started. And the antithesis can be true, where maybe they naturally had that more hummingbird metabolism, and I'm sure you guys all have met somebody that they seem to just plow through calories way faster than you suspect, and they're actually going to be even losing weight still after they go over to the maintenance. And that's one of the big things to keep in mind when we're working with somebody with the diet, which is everyone has those individual variances. So we have to have our plan, implement the plan, but then come back after a week, 2 weeks, or a month, reassess, and are we on the right track, or are we hemorrhaging weight way faster than we wanted to, or are we gaining weight way faster than we wanted to, or are we not making the progress that we wanted to? And that's where we're going to titrate those calories. So does that make sense? Like, this is the opposite of what we used for Blaine's example, where we could give them just a ballpark amount of calories, and then after a week, they maybe gain like 3 pounds, like, okay, that's way too fast. We need to slow this down. And then, or we could be like, yeah, they actually didn't gain a single pound. Like, okay, we underestimated them. Now we got to go harder. Does that make sense to you guys? Awesome. Like how it's a stair step, because you just lose a perfect percent body fat every once in a while, right? That's how that works. Yeah. They think they're going to be 17.2% body fat at the end of it, which is funny because they're assuming they're 20% body fat, which doubt it. But that's more if you want to go super high tier and you want to be like working with a bodybuilder, that's where you're going to start to use certain things like this. But it's a good way to start to give you an idea if you're on the right track when it comes to putting somebody in an appropriate caloric deficit to accomplish your goals. So what questions, comments, and concerns do you guys have for me? Why would it assume 20%? Because this is an American male, which means he's not that lean to start, Blaine. Come on, bud. Get on board.
So if you're a procrastinator like me, and when it comes to trying to make weight for a competition, would this be an accurate thing to use to say like lose weight and lose like 15 pounds in 2 weeks?
Ugh. Okay, let's run an experiment of sheer pain because it's going to be fun and easy. All right, Zach, how much you weighing these days?
200.
Male, actually 23?
I am 23.
5 foot what?
9.
Good. You are not that physically active. Let's not even lie about it.
Yeah.
No, just put active. So you're still a pretty active guy. So we're trying to get you down to what weight?
175.
Oh, sweet Jesus, dude. All right. Oh, sorry. He wants to reach his goal in 30 days. Ooh. Because pain, right?
Mhm.
And then goal weight is going to be 175. And then change your physical activity. Nah, but you can put in here like how much cardio you'd want to do. So now, look at how many calories you got to eat per day in order to make that weight. Zach, does that look safe?
No, not at all.
So, how many of you guys have ever heard of the movie The Machinist with Christian Bale? Oh boy. Okay, give me a second. Because depending on, I know better than ever enter anything into a search bar when I got students staring at it. Okay. So, okay, all of you guys know Christian Bale from Batman Begins, right? The movie he did before that was called The Machinist. And sweet Jesus. Those of you guys that have seen it, you're going to be in for a treat. But this is literally Christian Bale and The Machinist.
Wait, like he actually like lost that much weight for this role, or this is like
Yes. No, I see he lost that much weight for the role. He got
That's how
down
big of a
to,
method actor he is.
say it again.
I said that's how big of a method actor he is. Like he's literally insane when it comes to prepping for his roles.
Yeah, I think he got down to like $130 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like he starved himself down. His diet was an apple a day or a can of tuna fish. And yeah, when you get to the point at which you can see your ribs through your sternum, you're real skinny. And then I believe literally in the same year or later on that year, that's when he did Batman Begins. He bulked back up for that role. So, holy crap. Both. Yeah, the movie was good. Movie's good. It's very dark. It's really dark. But, therein lies the thing. So if we come back to Zach's non-machinist starvation plan, and let's just give him 120 days. Hey, by Christmas, you can be super skinny by Christmas there. And notice now it's 2,400 odd calories. Like that's a bit more of a feasible thing. And that's the big key is having a longer period of time to go ahead and do these things for. Now, you're still going to have a lot of issues. You can have some metabolic suppression after the fact, meaning your natural resting metabolic rate is going to be lower. This is meant to be exactly what it shows right here, which is a simulation. And notice we still have all of that potential variability to where it's saying it's 26% body fat. Boy, it's really being a jerk about your weight there, buddy. But notice there's situations where he could actually have gained most of that weight back. And notice it's only 365 days. So if we literally take it out to a full, okay, limit to only 500 days. I love it. God, science is so much fun. It's so cool. You can see there's a situation where he literally comes back to where he started, or pretty close to where he started, even on the maintenance calories. And that's the real monster, the hard thing about weight loss and keeping it off for the long haul. you can easily find yourself in a situation where the weight comes back on. So, good. That's all of the major components that I wanted to go ahead and talk through with you guys tonight over chapter 2. And then also giving you an idea of how we can do some estimations of the calories you need to take in each day in order to have your goals with weight gain, weight loss. But are there anything else that you guys would like to cover? Otherwise, you guys are good to go. Make sure you're staying on top of your homework quizzes and then your chapter quizzes. And then make sure you guys are going to be getting me your topic that you want to do your review article over. So I think I've had only one person give me that so far. So that's just something to stay and kind of give me an idea. Any of you guys have any ideas right now? You can throw it up in the chat or just go ahead and announce it, and I'll let you know if it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard and you should feel bad about it and you should never talk about it again. No, in reality, I was like, hey, that's a good idea. You should do it. Or like, you probably want to narrow it down a bit more. Okay, so Emily, what you're going to do is you're going to, the first journal article that you're going to be turning in, I believe that's going to be due in like early March. Or, God, dear God, what year is it, folks? I'm starting to lose all concept of the date and time. It's going to be due in late September, early October, where you're going to look at one review article in an area that you find interesting. So for me, one of the things that I'm interested in right now is going to be Russian neurological growth peptides. So I'd probably look at Cemex and Slenk, and then look at things along those lines. Okay, so strongman diet, that's, yes, Jai, you wrote in a question over it, which I thought was really weird, but I appreciated you trying. So yeah, if you don't mind, give me the basic topic idea. Now, when it comes to strongman diet, there's a lot of ways you could approach that. So you could look at it as how many calories should a strongman competitor be taking in and seeing what's out there in the literature, because there might not be that much out there. In fact, you know what? Let's go back to the screen share. My chat's not showing up easily whenever I go to screen share. Use protein supplementation. Hannah, yeah, that's a good one. You can definitely do that. Okay, let's go back over. So
It's a thesis, so I'm kind of happy to hear that you like that idea.
yeah. Okay, so yep, see, there you go. There's the link. Okay, but let's go ahead and review on so So notice we're not seeing, so like this right here is, these first two are legit, you know, in journal articles. So these are gonna both be reviews. Obviously this has nothing to do with nutrition. This does, and it's in physique sport, which is looking pretty, and who wants to do that? I'd rather be awesome.
What about like a strongman diet versus a bodybuilder diet?
Which is fine, but the problem is, I'm not seeing anything on just the nutrition there, because I mean, literally, that might not be something that's done, has been done. So,
Was mine not right at all, or just wasn't in the right format?
no, you're fine, bud. You're fine. It was in a weird format. So I just think the issue with here, it's going to be just hard to find that research. Okay, whereas I could go up here and say, so these are individual research studies, but notice right here, now that's a case report and it's a review of it, so that's not a true research study. Now here, negative consequences of low energy availability and natural male bodybuilding, a review. So there would be a review article, and that's the obvious issues of taking in way, way too few of calories when you happen to be getting ready or doing some type of, oh, here you go, nutrition recommendations for bodybuilders in the off season. Eric Helms again. Yeah, that dude just kills it in that area. Oh, here you go. Evidence-based recommendations for natural bodybuilding contest prep nutrition and supplementation. Hey, Alan Aragon, that guy got in a lot of trouble for some sexual harassment recently. Fun fact, garbage people everywhere. He's very short. I've only met him once. Not that it has anything to do with being a jerk to people on occasion. Okay, yeah, whey protein versus plant-based protein, that could definitely work, Jake. BCA on muscle fatigue and or athletic performance, good, yeah, see what you find there, Sean. Josh Crabtree, can you find many of their diets on YouTube? Just no, yeah. So that's the key thing is we're looking for peer-reviewed literature because the key thing is you can put anything you want up on YouTube. How many pro bodybuilders, strongmen, otherwise talk about like, yeah, my number one supplement is insert the thing that they pay me a lot of money to go ahead and represent. Your number one supplement is called testosterone, and then it's going to be enanthate, cypionate, propionate, growth hormone, things along those lines. But they don't really, they don't tout that as much. So the key is we're looking for what's really going on in the lit. Anybody else have some ideas or just want a little fine tuning? Make sure you guys take the quiz before the end of the night. Good. Now, Cam, I would keep it more vague as far as dietary guidelines for an offensive lineman and see what's out there, because there might be a decent information for collegiate linemen, but probably not as much for NFL. Yeah, the two most heavily researched supplements in all of science is caffeine and creatine. So Emily, you're not going to have any issues with finding a review article and God knows how many on caffeine. Let's be pleasant to each other in the chat, folks. This is not meant to turn into an internet forum or the comments on a YouTube video. Anybody else have an idea or question that they want me to, or yeah, as far as the topic they want me to go ahead and talk on or give them feedback on if that's going to work or help them refine it? Dietary needs for weight trainers on and off drugs. Ooh, I don't know if you'd be able to find much literature on individuals that are anabolically enhanced and how that would influence nutrition, but you could definitely find some stuff for just folks that are training in general. But that could be, it would probably be frustrating, but it could be really fascinating to look at, Blaine. Yeah, guys, it's okay. I'm going to reopen the quiz so you can take it right as soon as I get done talking, because I'm going to upload this to YouTube, and while I'm hanging around, just figure you've, oh dear God. You know, Ian, if you find any lit out there on using breast milk after you've passed the age where it's not creepy to be nursing on somebody, by all means. Yeah, look at, oh, Abby, vitamin D is the most frequently deficient vitamin in individuals in Western countries. You're going to find that a lot. So go ahead and dig in there. Hey, I'm just saying, I don't really like the whole dairy food group, because if you guys were driving down the road or walking or whatever else, and you saw a dude underneath a cow nursing in the middle of the field, I would probably call the police, because that cow can't give consent, and that's weird. But it's because it's so socially acceptable that we don't really question it, except for me and maybe a couple other people that are weird like I am. So, anything else, guys? You guys good? You can throw up a yes in the participant or in the polling, and then otherwise we'll go ahead and let you guys out. And you guys have a great night. Make sure you take that quiz ASAP and stay on top of everything, and stay safe out there, guys. So, well, I think since we're good, you guys stay safe, and I will talk to you guys more soon. Bye-bye.